Okay, Purim is on its way, so as far as getting ourselves ready in preparation, I'd like to learn a parak of the Megillah with you. And as promised in the title, what I'd like to start with is what is in my mind the strangest pasuk in the entire Megillah. Now, as I put that out there, I'm sure many of you might have other votes for other pasukim that might qualify as an odd or strange pasuk, but this is my vote. This is what I'd like to start with, and whether or not it's the strangest, I don't know, but I'm sure you'll agree with me that it is an odd pasuk. And the pasuk goes as follows. We're in the middle of the sixth parak. We're going to go over the sixth parak from the beginning in a moment, but just to jump to the end of the sixth parak. The end of the sixth parak is when Haman returns home after leading Mordechai through the streets of Shushan. Mordechai is decked out in the king's garments, and Haman is leading him. This is how you lead a person. And he comes home after this ordeal. He's got garbage on his head. The sages say he's in mourning. And he meets up with his wife, his supportive, loving, caring wife, after such a day. And he tells her what happened. And she responds to him as follows. I have it underlined for you. It is verse 13, Pasuk Yud Gimel, Vayisaper Haman lezeresh ishto u'lechol ha'yavav es kol asher karo. Haman comes home and he tells over to his wife and to all of his people who love him all that took place. And his wise advisors and his wife say back to him, "In mizera haYehudim Mordechai asher hachilosel and polufanav." If they say to him, Mordechai, before whom you've begun to fall, is a Jew, Lo suchal lo, then forget it. You will never be victorious against him. Ki nafolti polufanav. You will certainly fall before him. Now, let me ask you a very simple question. Does Haman know that Mordechai is a Jew?
Yeah, of course.
How do we know that? That was a trick question, because in the beginning of the third parak, because they say to him, Ki higilu asher hu Yehudi. The whole thing is because he's a Jew. And Vayives be'einav. Haman thought it was degrading only to knock off Haman. That's, I'm just going to take care of one little guy. I'm going to take care of an entire nation of Jews. Does his wife know that Haman has a thing for the Jews? Yeah, I would think so. And then Haman gets invited to this party. It's just himself and it's Esther and the king, and they're having a grand old time. And Esther invites him to a second party, and Haman walks out after that first party on top of the world. And then he sees Mordechai HaYehudi, and he's enraged, and he comes home and he tells his wife, and she hatches the plan together with all of these advisors. Why don't you set up a tree, and we're going to kill Mordechai, and we'll go back to the next party you're having. Do they know that Mordechai is a Jew at that point? Yeah, I think so. I think so. So he goes out to tell Achashverosh's big plan. We're going to kill Mordechai. And then the whole events happen, which we're going to learn about in a moment. And he comes back home, and she has what to say to him? She says, oh man, I mean, if he's a Jew, forget it. You're never going to be able to defeat him if he's a Jew. Don't we know that already? In Mizera HaYehudim Mordechai? If he's a Jew, Asher Achilosel and Polufanav. Well, I'm leaving in the back for people who are... Thank you. Mizera HaYehudim? What in the world does she mean when she says, if Mordechai is a Jew, forget it. You're finished. You're never going to be victorious over him. It's all over. Give it up.
It's not a question.
It is a question.
No, maybe that's not a question.
What do you mean it's not a question?
But it sounds like a question. Maybe it's not a question. Maybe it's a result.
So it is a way of thinking. But then what were they thinking beforehand? He wasn't a Jew? Yeah, right. Party tomorrow night. Fine. Party ends, Haman goes home. That's Parak Hay, chapter before the one we're learning tonight. He's on his way home. The Megillah tells us he's on top of the world. He's thinking, I'm the greatest, most powerful man in the world. Only I am invited to a party with the king and the queen. And then he sees Mordechai. He's filled by Imalei Haman Chema. He's just filled with a rage and anger. He goes home. He tells over his wife why he's so upset. It's not worth anything. I'm the most powerful man. It's not worth anything to me because of this guy, Mordechai. She devises the plan together with the advisors, which we mentioned a few moments ago. Create a gallows. Go to the king early in the morning. Tell the king your plan to kill Mordechai. You'll be ready to go to the party. That leaves us now where we're up to. What I'd like to do is read through the first 3 or 4 psukim, and we're just going to ask questions. I'd like you, I know we all know the story. Read through this as if you are now reading this for the first time. What questions would we have as we read through the first couple of psukim in Perek Vav? We've now set up the scene. We are at the night following the first party. The party took place, let's say, 8 o'clock at night. It's now midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning, waiting for the party which will be the following day. Balayla hahu nadidosh nas hamelech. That night, the king's sleep is disturbed. He can't sleep. Vayomer lo havi sefer hazichronos divrei hayamim vayunigram l'fnei hamelech. And he says, bring me the book of records, the chronicles, that they should be read before me. Give me your questions. Simple questions, obvious questions. The questions you would ask if you're reading the story for the first time.
Why would he ask for the chronicle?
Okay, one at a time. First question would be, why can't he sleep? That night, apparently, something is going on. Just had a party. Parties usually would cause a person to be a little bit, he's had what to drink. Why can't the king sleep? Now, I'm not saying there are not answers to this question. Let's just put all the questions out on the table. Why can't the king sleep? What does he do when he can't sleep?
He wants to read the
Now, what question would we ask? I mean, why would he ask for? Is that like a tax book that he says, like, I can't sleep? So that's boring. Okay, so we could say that's a boring story. Possible. But let's ask questions. King can't sleep, and he calls. Now, I would say the fact that the Megillah tells us this, that was an unusual event that he called for that book. If every time the king couldn't sleep, it was like, oh, here we go again, king can't sleep, and they pulled out the book, then we wouldn't have a verse that said, and the king called, read me from this book. So there's something unusual that the king can't sleep, and that's the book that he wants when he can't sleep. We're just asking questions. Let's go on a little bit. Vayimatzei kasuv, and they found written in that book, Asher Yigid Mordechai al Bigton of Teresh, that Mordechai had told the king about the plot of Bigton and Teresh, the 2 officers of the king who had attempted to take the king's life. That's what they found. Now, again, if we're just asking questions, what question would we ask?
How come they found that?
Was that just by chance? Vayimatzei, that's what they found. Were they looking for that? That they stumbled across that particular story? Or was that just part of the Purim miracle that they stumbled across? And now Rashi, which we're going to work on the approach of the Vilna Gaon, Rashi quotes that indeed that was part of the miracle. It was a miracle that the king couldn't sleep. It was a miracle that they found this story. That's all part of the Purim miracle. That's one of the approaches that Rashi quotes. We're going to be working, that is an approach. I'm going to be working through the approach of the Vilna Gaon, which is a different approach. But that's one approach. If we're going to work through something which is not just miraculous, we would ask, okay, that's an interesting thing, that's a story that they found. What does the king then do when they find this story? Vayomer HaMelech, so the king can't sleep. He calls for this book. They found an interesting story. Mordechai saved your life. And what's the first question that he asks? What did we do for him? Now, we're so used to that question because we read the story every year. That's an interesting question. It's the middle of the night, it's 2 o'clock in the morning, the king can't sleep, he calls for the book, and they found the story, and all the king wants to know is, hey, what did we do for that guy? What did we do for Mordechai? What did we do for him? And they tell him, doesn't say anything here.
That's the strange part, actually.
We didn't do anything.
If somebody tried to kill him, then nothing was done about it.
So that's certainly part of the miracle, that going back a few years when this event happened, that nothing had happened at the time, that now it's being brought up on this night, and they respond to him and they say, we didn't do anything. Now, Pasuk Dalet, Vayomer HaMelech mi bechatzer. It's 2 o'clock in the morning, the king can't sleep, he's got the book reading, they found the story, he says, what do we do? And then he says, who's in the courtyard? And who's there? Haman. Now, if you're the king, and Haman shows up at your door at 2 o'clock in the morning, what's the first question you would ask him?
Why are you here?
You guys have done this before, right? Okay, that's the first question I would ask. Well, that's not the first question the king asks. And it's Haman. Now, why has Haman come? Because he is so excited about this idea that he's going to create this gallows and hang Mordechai. He shows up. He's excited to take care of this. So they say to the king, it's Haman. Vayomer HaMelech Yavon. King says, come on in. Vayovo Haman. Haman shows up, and who speaks first? The king speaks. Now, Haman has showed up at 2 o'clock in the morning. You'd think he has something to say, right? King speaks first, and he says, not the question that you all would have asked, but he says, what would you do if you wanted to bestow honor on someone? And then the rest of the story is going to go as we know. So far, so good? Those are just some of the questions we would ask if we were reading through it. Let me share with you the Vilna Gaon's approach. Vilna Gaon says as follows. Why can't the king sleep? Well, let's think this through. What should be or is troublesome to the king right now? What did he just experience?
Somebody was trying to kill him.
Nobody's trying to kill him.
Before, that was after, right?
What?
Why is she right now?
Okay, we have a very strange thing here. We have a party. We have a party. Now, there are a couple of strange elements here. One of the strange elements is, if you're a queen and you wanted to invite your husband to an intimate dinner, how many people would be at that dinner? Two. Okay, good. Just wanted to make sure. There should be 2 people there. So the king has got to address, well, this is a little bit odd. The queen invited Haman. Now that's not so odd. It's only odd if you think that what you wanted was an intimate dinner for 2. Then it becomes odd. But there's another oddity of this story which we often forget. We mentioned it a few minutes ago. Everybody knows, the queen says to Mordechai, I can't go in there uninvited. What happens to me if I do? To be killed. Well, guess who's included in that everybody knows? The king. The king knows when those doors opened and in barged his wife, he also knows that she took her life in her hands for this invitation. She was ready to die for whatever it is that she wants. Would that pique your interest, what she wants?
Sure.
So the king says to her, as she barges in, what do you want? And she says, a party. Together with Haman. Okay. Which now means that there's something out there that the queen is willing to die for, risking her life, and invites Haman to come. Now, if you're the king, why is Haman there? What position?
She's not alone with the king.
What position does Haman have in the kingdom? It's the number 2 man. If you're asking for something big, if you want to go into the boss, whoever it is, and you're going to make a big request, who do you take with you? Right? If I need to ask of number 1, I want to take, so in other words, this is an important request. I bring along his number 2 advisor. Now, clearly whatever's on Esther's mind is big. It's so big that she's ready to die for it. And whatever she's going to ask, she brings the big guns with her. She brings Haman together, and they're going to make this big request. So he sits down at the dinner party, and he says to her, half the kingdom, it's yours. What's up? And she says, I'm not ready to talk yet. Come back tomorrow night for a party. Tomorrow night I'll tell you. And that night, the king can't sleep. Why can't we sleep at night?
But his worries.
Something's on your mind. Wow, it's a strange series of events. She's ready to die? My queen is ready to die for something, which means she's missing something that's not worth living for without. She's ready to die. She brings in the big guns. She's not ready to tell me what it is yet. She can't sleep. Tossing and turning and tossing and turning. What in the world can she want? Queen doesn't lack anything. She can have whatever she wants. Says the Vilna Gaon, he came up with one thing. We know one thing about Esther and only one thing about her. We know a lot more, but the people knew one thing about her. What was the only piece of information we know about Esther?
It's beautiful.
Well, where did she come from? Whose home was she taken from?
Mordechai.
That's all we know. An orphan girl raised by this man Mordechai. That was the home we took her from. Is this your child? No, she's not my child. What nation are you from? She doesn't say. But we know where she was physically taken from a home. She was raised by Mordechai. Says the Vilna Gaon, the king says to himself, my queen isn't lacking anything. What is the queen lacking? Ready to die for something. Which ask for it, she'll get it. There can only be one person in the world, one person we know she has any connection with, that she'd be ready to die for. The person who raised her. Must be, she's about to ask for something on behalf of Mordechai. I can't think of anything else, says the Vilna Gaon, says the king to himself. And that's why she brings Haman, the number 2 guy, and the queen. They're going to ask for something. And whatever it is, it's going to be big. Because you don't risk your life, you don't make this party, you don't then stall for the next night's party. What do they want for this guy Mordechai? Well, if you're a guy who's going to be asked for something big, so before the request, what do you want to get for yourself? You want some type of leverage. If they're going to ask for something so big that it's worth dying for, and the 2 top people in the entire province are going to come to ask of it, maybe they have good reason to ask. You don't ask for something so big for nothing. Maybe they have good grounds to ask us. Well, I don't want to be in a position as the king in which someone's going to make this type of request, and I have nothing to say back why I should have some leverage. I'm not ready to do so. So the king can't sleep. He can't sleep, and he figures this all out. So what does he ask for? Book of Chronicles. What's he looking for? Mordechai. Says the Vilna Gaon, he Googled Mordechai. It was not just flipping. He didn't use that language, but that's what he says. They're not just flipping through. They're looking for something. They're looking for something. What are they looking for? They're looking for Mordechai. What in the world? Did he do something that would warrant the 2 top people in the entire country coming to ask of me something so big that it's worth dying for? I got to know if they have some grounds to ask. I have to know. So they're looking, and they find indeed Mordechai actually saved your life. Well, that's a problem, says the king. That's a lot of leverage. So he says right away, what question does he ask? Well, what do we do for him already? I've obviously discharged that responsibility. And they say, no, actually. Now the king in his mind, according to the Vilna Gaon, has now figured out, in his mind, the only potential thing that could be going on over here is a request on behalf of Mordechai. And they actually have me. I'm going to be in trouble. They're going to ask of me something. I can't say no. I actually owe my entire life to Mordechai. And as he's thinking this through, there's a knock at the door. 3 o'clock in the morning. The king says, who's that? They say Haman. Why does the king think Haman is there? You're the king, taking you through this thought process. Why is Haman there?
Same fun as you. Excited.
And he's going to do what?
He wants to ask for the death of.
No, not why is he really there. Why does the king think Haman came?
To tell him what Esther wants.
He's going to start the process of getting whatever the request is. So the king cuts him off because he knows he's in trouble because he's behind the 8 ball. Mordechai actually saved his life, and I got nothing on him. So the king, before Haman opens up his mouth, now why is Haman really there?
He wants to kill the Jews.
We can talk about that, right? Haman came because he's so excited to have Mordechai killed, he can't even wait until the morning. So he shows up. But the king, he's been tossing and turning all night. He can't figure out what the world's going on with Haman. And he thinks they're on the same team, about to make a request on behalf of Mordechai. So Haman's about to say something, and the king says, so Haman, what would you do to honor someone? Because the king's thinking, I'm going to get this all through, because by the time the party comes, I don't want this on my head that I got no leverage when they come and make this request. So he cuts Haman off. Now again, if you were there, and Haman shows up at 3 o'clock in the morning, your first question should have been,
why are you here?
What are you doing here? He doesn't let him open up his mouth, which is a very strange thing at 3 o'clock in the morning. And he says, what would you do? Now Haman, who is so full of himself, is distracted by this question and says, well, obviously, he's talking about me, because who else would he want to honor? And he comes up with this idea of, well, take him through the town, put him on the king's horse, give him the king's clothing, and have somebody lead him through town. Now again, if we were to read this story for the first time, and the king heard that, give me a time frame when you think you would want to do that to Mordechai. Like within a day, within a week, within a month, like put it on the to-do list at some point. What does the king say when Haman finishes speaking? Maher. now. Why is it so important that it be done right away? It has to be done before the party. We don't have time to wait. 3 o'clock in the morning, that's what the king's thinking. Maher now? We haven't repaid Mordechai in 6 years. No. Maher. Right away, the king says to Haman, and do that to Mordechai HaYehudi al tapel devar mikol asher dibarta. Don't leave anything out. Okay, that's what happens. Haman goes to Mordechai's house, gets him all dressed, the whole thing. Now, if you were in Mordechai's head right now, you would have no idea what's going on. Mordechai's been fasting together with all the Jewish people for a couple of days. He knows that Esther has got in. I don't know. I have no idea whether or not he knows that Esther had one party and waited for another. I don't know what he knows. We just don't know. But that morning, Haman shows up at his door. Even if Mordechai knows what's going on, he knows that the request hasn't been made. It's not happening till later that night. Haman shows up in his door with royal garments and says, "You need to put this on." Mordechai probably said something like, "What's up?" And Haman probably said something like, "Don't ask." and he leads him through town. The Megillah says, afterwards, Mordechai goes back to his sackcloth in mourning because he's got a big day of prayer and fasting ahead of himself to save the Jewish people. And Haman returns home. Now, put yourself for a moment in Haman's house. You are his wife. You are his trusted advisors. Now remember, I know it's hard to go back, but try to remember an age before email, texting, and cell phones. Just go way back. When was the last time you saw Haman?
When he went to the king.
Give me a time frame.
After the party.
It's midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning, Haman's come home from the party, he's so angry, you're sitting around the kitchen table, he's telling you how great he is, all of his wealth, all of his sons, his position, he was invited, but that guy Mordechai is driving him nuts. And sitting around the kitchen table, a plan is hatched. And what's that plan? We're going to make the gallows, you're going to go to the king, and Haman takes off, what time? I don't know, 2 o'clock in the morning, 3 o'clock in the morning, he can't wait. So the last time you saw Haman, you're in his home, 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, everybody is wringing their hands. This is the best plan ever. We're going to kill Mordechai in the morning. We're going to go to the party. It's going to be amazing. When is the next time you see Mordechai? Haman. He's leading Mordechai through the streets. What do you think happened?
Killed him.
Who kills who?
Haman maybe got Mordechai killed, or he created the gallows.
No, you see Mordechai leading, being on top of the horse. The next time you see Haman, Mordechai's on top of the horse with the king's clothing, on the king's horse, and Haman is leading him. The last time you saw Haman, you were going to use the number 2 man. He hates Mordechai, he's going to get him killed. What happened? What do you think happened? You're at home. The only option, says the Vilna Gaon, for the members of Haman's household is, it must be, you went to the king in the middle of the night, you woke up the king and you said, I have this great idea, I'm going to kill Mordechai. And the king must have said something along the lines of,
You're crazy.
why? And you must have said something along the lines of, I don't know, I hate him, he doesn't bow down, or this, that, or the other. And the king must have said something like, I don't know, and called Mordechai in, and there was this big debate, maybe a din Torah, there was a discussion about it. And who won? So if you're Haman's family, and the last time you saw Haman was you sent him out with his great plan to kill Mordechai, and the next time you see him, he's leading Mordechai in the king's clothing, you must conclude it didn't work out. To say it politically correct. It really didn't work out. Well, let's follow that thought. What would you suppose would happen to a number 2 man who hatches a plan to kill a guy and the king sides with the guy? What happens to the number 2 man? Trouble. Let's leave it at that. Trouble. So picture the scene. Haman, trudges up to his home after leading Mordechai all over the place. He walks in the door. What does he find going on in his house? Says the Vilna Gaon, bedlam, total chaos. Why is there chaos? Everybody's running around, packing bags. We got to get out of here. We're next. If our husband Haman lost out to Mordechai and had to lead him through town, he's not retaining his position. It's finished. We're over. It's done. Get out. So Haman trudges home, 8, 9 o'clock, whatever time it is, 12 noon, by the time he finishes his parade, he's exhausted, and he walks in the door, and it's like a hurricane. And he looks around, and he says, "What's going on?" And they say something like, "What's going on? What do you mean what's going on? We sent you out in the middle of the night to kill Mordechai. The next time we see you, you're leading him around town. Obviously, you've been deposed. We're finished. Pack your bags." And what does he say to them? He says, "No, no, 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 no. You're not going to believe what happened," he says to them. "The craziest thing ever," he says. "You're not going to believe this. I get to the king's palace," he says. "I'm there with my plan. I'm about to tell him. The king gives me permission to come in. I'm about to say something. And you know what happened? He cuts me off with this ridiculous question of, like, what would you do to honor somebody? I didn't even get to ask my question. I never even got the words out that I want to kill Mordechai. He asked me this question about leading somebody through town. I gave him this great idea, and he tells me to do it to Mordechai. Can you believe it? Mordechai, the guy who I'm going to have him killed. The king told me to move the Mordechai. So they say, "Doesn't that mean that Mordechai's number 2? He says, "Nah, it means nothing." I don't know what the king was thinking. It was the craziest thing. It's the middle of the night. All of a sudden, the king says, "Lead this on Mordechai." I asked Mordechai, "What's going on?" He has no idea either. He asked me, "Hey, Haman, what's going on?" I don't know. He doesn't know. I don't know. It's bizarre, he says to them.
Sounds like the Oscars.
It's total chaos.
But everyone should know why he was being led, because it says, "Kata yesa Isha."
Shem Melech HaFei Speaker. Why?
Usually they would announce it, no?
I mean, even if it was, he wants to say, but like, that it all happened today, everybody would be sad. I don't know, strange. But Haman says to them, "Don't worry. I'm still number 2. Nothing at all changed. The king, just out of the blue, decided today to repay Mordechai, even if we assume, for something that happened 6 years ago. Don't worry," he says to them. All is good. If you look back in the pasuk, he uses a very specific word. The underlined pasuk. Vayisaper Haman lezeresh ishto u'lecholei havav es kol asher karo. He tells over to his wife and the family all that happened. That word karahu is a very important word. That word means mikra, happenstance, just by chance. It's the word most affiliated with Amalek, asher karcha baderach, that happened upon you. Amalek stands the antithesis of what Jews are, this idea of anything, happenstance, it's just mikra, just happened. And Haman says to his family, "Don't worry. Everything is under control. It's exactly as I got it planned out. A little delay, a slight bump in the road. I'm going to have to wait a little bit till the king forgets about this whole thing to have Mordechai killed. But I'm still the number 2 guy. I'm going to the party, and I'm going to still get Mordechai killed." Nothing has changed. And it's to that his wife and advisors respond with what otherwise would be the strangest pasuk in the Megillah, except now, says the Vilna Gaon, is smooth. What does she say to him? Im vayomer lo chachama v'zeresh ishto, im mizera haYehudim Mordechai asher hachilosa linpol lefanav. If this Mordechai that you've now begun to fall before him is a Jew, lo tzuchalo, you cannot defeat him. Ki nafol tipol lefanav. You're telling me, they say to him, that the tide has turned, that all of the sudden, you who are on top of the world, and now things just seem to be working out in a weird way that ended up with Mordechai on top and you on bottom, and you're telling us it's mikra, it just happened, and we shouldn't be concerned? Not with the Jews. If Mordechai is a Jew, meaning if this whole story is about, we can attack them all we want, but if you've begun to fall, if the tide has turned, and it looks like it's just random, this doesn't mean anything, there's no significance to this, to that, they say, to him, you're finished. The Vilna Gaon explains. There's a concept of mazel. There's a concept of constellations, and those who know how to read the mazalos. There's also a concept of ein mazel Yisrael. Klal Yisrael is not bound by mazel. The reason that the Vilna Gaon explains dates all the way back to our origins, and Avram Avinu, who is 99 years old without any children, with a wife who is 89 years old without the ability to have children, and the mazalos would say, impossible. Impossible. There's no chance, there's no mechanism in the world that we live in for a child to be born. It's not just a 1 in a million chance. None. Zero. Impossible. Vayetze Avraham achutza, the pasuk says, and Hashem takes Avram outside. Chazal describe above, outside the mazalos, and says, you're going to have a child. You're my people. You don't fit in the world of normal. We are not a normal people. And that's why, says the Vilna Gaon, when we fall to the depths unknown to mankind. Jewish people in our depths of despair are as low as you can get. And when we raise ourselves up, we are up above any other nation that's ever lived. We only exist in Gullus. We're exiled Jews. Our parents, our grandparents, our great-grandparents, 2,000 years. So we know lots of instances of being about as low as you can get, and yet we're still here. No other nation in the world can say that they've been through what we've been through and are still here to talk about it. Ein mazel Yisrael, says the Vilna Gaon, because we're not normal. We haven't been normal, never will be normal, and never have been normal. And when we're on the bottom, we're on the bottom. When we're top, we are at the top. The Gemara records a story during the times of the second Beis Hamikdash. There was a terrible siege in Yerushalayim. Famine was indescribable. And the Gemara tells of Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, he was riding on his donkey through the town, and he comes across a young lady, Jewish woman, trying to find barley seeds amongst the dung of the animals to eat. And he says to the Gemara, who are you? And she says, Rebbe, you don't recognize me. Don't you remember? I'm the daughter of Nakdimun ben Gurion, who's one of the wealthiest Jews in Yerushalayim. You signed my ksuva. And the Gemara records the exorbitant money from both sides, hers and her chassan's side. And the Gemara says he looked at her now looking for animal fodder, barley seeds, from amongst the dung of the animals. And he says, Ashreichem Yisrael. He says, how praiseworthy are the Jewish people, that when we fall to the greatest depths. But when we rise up, there is no one like us. We're the two extremes. That's literally what it means to have no mazel, because we're not a normal people. Not a normal people. Says the Vilna Gaon, Haman, when he comes home, and he says to his family, he won't believe how crazy it was. Most bizarre day of my life. But don't worry, everything is fine. To that they said, Mizera HaYehudim, you're telling me that with the Jews, you went from the top of the top, and now you crossed that tipping point, but it's just happenstance? It's just chance? Not with the Jews. If you've begun to fall, it's over. Get out. Take down the gallows, forget the whole thing. But there's no time, because as they're still talking, the Megillah says, Sarisei HaMelech Higiu, the officers of the king came, Vayavilu Lahavias Haman, and they rushed quickly to take Haman, and exactly as begun, once that chain of events begins, then there's no stopping it. That, says the Vilna Gaon, is the explanation of this, the episode, the instances of this particular parak, and what in my mind would otherwise be one of the strangest psukim in the Megillah, in Mizera HaYehudim Mordechai. He's a Jew, but in this context he says, that's the Purim story. When it begins to turn, and it looks like just weird, odd circumstances, not for the Jews, not the Purim story. Yeah, no more comments, questions, yeah.
So the question that we had of, well, is this the first time they found out that he was Jewish? We still have that question, because if they respected the Jews' ability to turn on a dime like that, they shouldn't have been so eager to attack in the first place. They knew he was Jewish originally. So
Right, well, that's always a Malik. A Malik always jumps into attack, and we've always found when we're down, which they were, you have to remember historically, in context right now, we are in between the first and the second, after the destruction of the first Beis HaMikdash, we are in exile for the first time in Jewish history, which means none of the Jews at this time know what it's like to live in exile. We know, looking back over 2,000 years, that we're going to go through one calamity after another one, and despite the fact that Hashem's presence is hidden, He's going to pull us through each and every time. This was the Jews' first experience, which is one of the significances of this entire Yontif of Purim. This is the first experience. They've never been in exile before. There's never not been a Beis HaMikdash to go to. There's never been no open prophecy. What do we do with this time? Maybe if you were a Jew at the time, we're a little, it's 2,000 years of history. If there would be, heaven forbid, such a decree, that all Jews are going to be wiped out, destroyed, annihilated, and murdered, what would we think about that? It would be terrible, but we know it's not going to happen. We have too many years of Jewish history. Like, I'm not saying there won't be Jews who will be killed, but the Jewish people, would there ever be a thought that we would disappear? No way, not. And that's why we have Yom Tov, Hanukkah, Purim. That teaches us that. They don't have a Hanukkah or a Purim to teach us that. They thought at the time, that's it.
So from Haman's family's perspective, the night before, when they were so eager to do the gallows and everything, they were thinking they were still riding the low that the Jews were on, and then only once they saw,
right.
It's turning.
They were going to wipe them out. They have plans. All the Jews are in mourning. We are going to wipe out the entire Jewish nation. They're a Malik, and they're going to succeed. And then a Malik, like these wacky happenstances happen, and they say, that we woke the sleeping giant, so to speak.
So I guess the only thing that's still strange then is why the Lashon is in Mizera HaYehudim. It should have been, because he's a Jew, and now it's changed, you should get out.
It's really the focus is on that you've begun to fall. If he's a Jew and you've begun to fall, then it's over. It's time to start. Yeah.
You said the only thing that was certain about Esther is she grew up in Mordechai's house. He's a Jew.
Mm-hmm.
They have an edict against the Jews. So where's the king in all of this? That this is his queen. She's obviously connected with the Jew, or she's Jewish.
He didn't know that it was against the Jews. He has no idea. Haman never said it was against the Jews.
Well, Mordechai knew, and the people in the know knew. In other words,
the king, when Esther says there's a decree against my people, he doesn't know what's going on. So there's clearly, he knows that there was a nation, but that's part of the whole debate of like what does the king know and what doesn't he know. But it was not, Haman never uses the word Jews when he talks to the king. So it's unclear whether or not he would have ever put that. It seems clearly that he never put that together.
And how does Zeresh put this together? How does she know? She know
Ein
that
Mazel
it's,
Yisrael,
how does she know? Nothing to do with gossip, but what does she have foresight?
I guess there was, I don't know if they had that tradition about the Jews of Ein Mazel Yisrael, that there are different type of people. They clearly had something about the Jews. She was descended, I don't know.
That's strange, actually.
To go back to when Esther was the one actually who told Ahasuerus B'Shem Mordechai about the plot. So it might have been that the king was thinking about, Esther and her connection to Mordechai, and that's why they read that piece in the
You're fitting that into his trying to figure out what they would want in regards to Mordechai. Right.
I think the Vilna Gaon's approach on Ahasuerus is really completely different from the narrative that I think most of us here think. We think Ahasuerus as almost like a comical character, is easily manipulated by Haman. The Vilna Gaon is now saying he's a thoughtful person who has really he's troubled by this and trying to get out of the story. So I think that the approach of the Vilna Gaon is really changes the whole narrative about
So there was a dispute in the Medrash whether or not Achashverosh is a chacham or a tipesh, whether or not he's a fool or he's a wise person. And sometimes when you have eclectic type people, it's sometimes hard to tell, is that really smart or is that just being really foolish? But there are two approaches in the sages as to what he is. But even so, I don't know that in the way that he addresses that, it is odd that your wife is ready to die for something. So the fact that it would trouble him, just to try to figure out, like, what in the world is this? That she literally risked her life. So I don't know that it's so against the narrative of a jolly old king that is like a new level of something that might like pique his interest to try to figure something out. But
Well, his last wife risked her life. Didn't think too much of it then.
All right, well, he was drunk then. That's true.
At a
Yeah.
party.
The words in the Megillah seem to go against Haman being confident in achieving
Yeah.
Seeming to say, Haman nidchaf el beito avel v'chafui rosh, that he's despondent is what they say in English. So that doesn't seem like he has that confidence. Don't worry, it's just turning a little bit, it's still.
Okay, I hear that, but the reality is when he walks home, again, the way that Vilna Gaon paints the picture, before he actually walks home, so he would be for good reason. Whether or not we say that literally just had garbage dumped on his head, or whether or not his daughter actually dies, but it was a humiliating thing regardless. The way that Vilna Gaon is painting it is that when he walks in the door, they have taken it to a level of, it means everything is over. And to that he responds, that doesn't mean that, just because I had a horrible day, which I think objectively we could say he did. So I think we could address the Aval v'chaflorish just from what he had experienced, and then it was when he walks in and he sees they took it to a different level, and he says, no, don't worry about it, everything is still going to be fine until they say to him, it doesn't work that way with the Jews, that's just not how they function.
Is there any issue with Haman showing up without being called upon in the middle of the night? Like,
So it's a good question. In other words, he was there, and the king asked, and the king gives him permission to come. And he doesn't actually walk in. The king asks me bechatzer. His servants say it's Haman. And the king invites him in. But I think that highlights how odd it is that the way all of you responded. His first question should have been,
Why are you?
"What are you doing here?" It was so odd. And yet, he's in this world of, I'm going to find out first and preempt this whole plan that he had, and really Haman had come to have him killed, and they totally missed each other. Anyway, that's the approach of the Vilna Gaon as to how he dresses Perek Vav. I personally think it's a fascinating approach. Obviously, one can ask questions along the way, but that's the approach that he shares in terms of the lesson of Ein Mazel Yisrael, and when we're up, when we're down. And as the story presents itself, and reading through the story in a new light as to how things were taking place. So I thank you all for being here. Wish you all a Freilich and Purim, and look forward to celebrating with you Motzei Shabbos and Sunday. So I want to thank you very much. I want to remind everybody, all the women in particular, that this coming Wednesday night, tomorrow night, Tuesday night, Scribe with the Tribe will have the Megillah here. Wednesday night is a women's Rosh Chodesh lecture in honor of Purim at the home of the Orzaks. Dr. Benina Brat will be speaking. That is at 8 o'clock? 7:30? What time? 8 o'clock. So please make an effort to be there. Have a great night.
I want to ask you.